from Donald Trump again. That's just in. He was on board Air Force One with reporters saying that when it comes to pharmaceuticals, and this will involve us, that work is still being done on a potential deal. Also interesting on China, hopeful of a deal there, but TikTok, the sale of TikTok might be used in some kind of exchange. That's just a few pointers there. Yeah. So he also said, Ross, that the operation is done.
Yes.
But is the patient actually okay?
Well, that's the question. The patient isn't okay right now, but the question is how long is it going to take the patient to recover? Now, one thing you did hear him say there was really it could take 2 years to start to build plants. Remember, this whole thing is about trying to get foreign nationals, in other words, foreign companies and American companies, to bring factories back to America. Now, the whole point about that is you cannot build a factory overnight. And so the point is, how long does it take to rebuild these factories, to get the investment into the United States? Because that is the thing that would trigger the economic startup in America. That is the thing that Donald Trump is punting on. But the issue is that the time it takes in the meantime will mean that Americans will pay higher prices for goods, which includes for Australian beef. So, there's no doubt that Americans don't have enough beef and their beef is more expensive than ours. And so as a result, inflation goes up. And the reason why markets have tanked in the way in which they have is because inflation is higher, because you suddenly start to see the prospect of interest rates potentially being higher, then it could tank the economy. So have a look at this. Here's the Dow Jones overnight, $3 trillion US wiped off the value of stock markets overnight. The Dow Jones, its worst night for 5 years. So then you go to the NASDAQ, down nearly 6%. So this is all of the big tech companies. This is the likes of the Apples, the Googles, the Amazons. All of these have been smashed up in that fall overnight. If we go to some of the big fallers in America, now there's a common thread here, which I'll explain, Boeing being the exception perhaps. Nike, Apple, Amazon, Disney, all have operations outside of America. And so you could see that, say, for example, in some of the big fallers here. If we have a look at Europe, you'll see the same thing. If we go to the Europeans, Adidas, right?
Wow.
Manufactures in Asia, sells in America. That's the story. Luxottica makes sunglasses, makes them in Asia and Europe, sells them in America.
They make all the sunglasses too. They make all the sunglasses. All the brands.
Louis Vuitton, the same story. So then I'll take you back here to Australia yesterday. I think we should be able to show you this from yesterday. They're big fallers here in Australia yesterday. As we bring them up, the story is very similar. This is our stock market yesterday. This is, in fact, what's taken place here yesterday, which wasn't so bad compared with what happened in America, but we are going to get smashed up today. But if we have a look at some of the stocks that fell here yesterday, Pete, have a look at this. Satire, basically fashion goods sourced from Asia and other parts, sold in America. Ansell, goods made in Asia in particular, sold in America. Breville, same story. Yeah. So, you can see here there's a common thread here that if you are actually making the goods in America, and there are a few examples of that, then you generally were okay. So this is the oil price as well. Look at that. That's been smashed up, and that's because the global risk of recession is now much, much higher.
So is that why Whitehaven got creamed yesterday as well?
Yeah, because, of course, if energy prices come off, less demand for energy, share prices start to tumble. Wow. But that oil price overnight really is symptomatic of the world now fearing that there's a greater chance of a global recession and a recession in the United States. That's why the stock market is tanking.
There was another point that Annalise brought up a short time ago as well. It's a good one that, Temu, which floods the American market with cheap products, as Annalise said. You kind of feel rich by buying a lot of this stuff, but they've been hit now too.
Well, there's no doubt, because what's going to happen is that the tariffs on those goods simply raises those prices. But as soon as you start raising prices, what you start to do is you start to raise interest rates as well, right? Because that's the natural reaction to higher inflation if that's what takes place. I want to show you one thing out of the money markets this morning, and that is the chance of interest rate movements here in Australia. Now, if we have a look at it, I've pulled this out of Reuters this morning, and effectively what it shows is a chance of interest rate cuts here in Australia. If the economy weakens here, there's an increased chance of more interest rate cuts. So the chance of one interest rate cut this year, pretty much a given. It'll happen next month.
Next month, okay.
2 cuts, 92%.
Is that back to back?
3 cuts, then 71%. What's that?
Is one cut, 2 cuts? Do you think that's back to back?
We might be spaced, but the fact of the matter is it's by the end of this year, by December this year.
Okay.
So a 40% chance now that there'll be 4 interest rate cuts this year.
Wow.
So you can see that really this is changing and the reason for it. So there's 40% chance of recession now. That's coming out of the world's biggest bank, JP Morgan. So again, just what Donald Trump has done has changed markets, has changed the outlook for economies, and certainly increased the chance of a risk of a global recession. But as Donald Trump says, the patient's had the operation, but now is in recovery mode. The question is, how long does it take for that turn to take place?
A really good point you make there about building factories, within 18 months to 2 years.
Well, that's right. How long would it take in Australia? How long does it take to build a factory in Australia? How long would it take in Australia?
5 years?
Planning approvals?
All that?
Environmental approvals?
Yeah.
Can the government actually get things done? Energy prices, you're not going to get it done in Australia in 2 years.
I mean, this is like the kind of financial pain that could go that long.
Exactly.
Upending the global financial system certainly does that. I've got to go. I'm out of time. But really interesting as always, Ross. Thank you. We'll chat again soon.